But no living man am I. You look upon a woman. Éowyn I am, Éowyn's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Be gone if you be not deathless. For living or dark undead, I will smite you if you touch him. No Lord of the Rings fan forgets the iconic line from the film. I am no man. But Éowyn of Rohan is far more than her moment of glory. She's a shield maiden, haunted by loss, bound by duty, and desperate to matter. Let's get into it. Éowyn is a noblewoman, the niece of King Theoden. She serves him loyally, tending to his royal household while her brother and the warriors she admires ride off to battle, again and again. But Theoden isn't himself. Under the spell of Grima Wormtongue, the king has grown passive, poisoned. Her cousin Theodred has just died. Her parents are long gone. Grief casts a long shadow over the Golden Hall and across all of Middle-earth. Éowyn tells us she feels caged, trapped in a role that she never asked for. She fears growing old in a body that has never fulfilled its potential, carrying grief she's never been able to outrun. Middle-earth is bracing for war. Doom is on the horizon. And Éowyn doesn't want to wait for death to come. She wants to meet it, to turn her pain into purpose, to rush forward towards the fire instead of sitting in its shadow. She is not driven by glory. She's driven by grief. And that's what makes her story so powerful. Tolkien never gave us a direct answer to Éowyn's origin. In his letters he wrote, "Though not a dry nurse in temper, she was also not really a soldier or Amazon, but like many brave women, was capable of great military gallantry at a crisis." So where did she come from? We know Tolkien loved Norse and Germanic myth. He was inspired by Beowulf, the Volsunga saga, and other tales of ancient warriors. But there's no single source for Éowyn. Her story seems to echo many voices, across time, across cultures. So today we ask, can we trace the woman of history and legend in Éowyn's journey? Let's begin with legend. Before Tolkien ever wrote The Riders of Rohan, Norse legend had already galloped across Europe, sword raised, singing sagas of war and glory. Among them rode the Shieldmaidens, women who took up arms, fought beside men, and were even said to choose who lived or died. Not all Shieldmaidens are myth. Archaeologists have unearthed Viking graves long assumed to belong to men, only to find female remains buried with swords, horses, and the signs of battle. These women weren't just tokens of fantasy. They were leaders, strategists, protectors, feared and honored. And Éowyn? She could have stepped straight from those stories. Her people, the Rohirrim, are steeped in Anglo-Saxon and Norse traditions. Their mead halls, their war horses, their poetry, all echo a northern culture Tolkien knew intimately. Éowyn is the living spirit of a shield maiden. When she rides into battle disguised as a man, it's not just for her uncle or her country. It's because she believes, as the shield maidens before her did, that her worth is not limited to hearth and home. Her strength as a woman does not oppose her femininity, it completes it. She slays the Witch King, not with brute force, but through prophecy, defiance, and cleverness. The tale might have ended there, as many shield maiden stories do, with the death, glory, and a funeral fit for a song, but Tolkien gave her more. Brynhildr and the Valkyries. Tolkien, a scholar of myth and language, drew deeply from Old Norse texts, especially the Volsunga saga, a brutal and poetic tale of warriors, fate, dragons, betrayal, and even a cursed ring. Sound familiar? Among these stories are the Valkyries, fierce warrior women who choose who lived or died in battle, and sometimes entered the fray themselves. One of the most iconic Valkyries is Brynhildr. Brynhildr is a warrior queen and a seer, bound by honor and cursed by fate. She's powerful, perceptive, and doomed. She falls in love with the dragon slayer Sigurd, but is betrayed by those she trusted most. That betrayal, combined with the heartbreak and grief that followed, leads her to choose death over life. It's a powerful, tragic arc, one that reflects the limits that myth often places on strong women. Give them glory, but tear them down if they break. grieve, or rage too loudly. Éowyn walks a similar path. She's a warrior at heart, a woman consumed by grief and heartache. But unlike Brynhildr, she survives. Tolkien breaks the mythic pattern. He gives his Valkyrie a future. From the cold mists of the north, we move to the blood-soaked soil of Roman Britain, and to another woman who stood against an empire, Boudica, Queen of the Iceni. As a young woman, Boudica married Prasutagus, king of the Iceni tribe. Together, they had at least 2 daughters. When Prasutagus died, he attempted to secure peace by leaving his kingdom jointly to his daughters and the Roman Emperor Nero. That peace was short-lived. Rome ignored the will, seized the kingdom, flogged Boudica in public, and brutally assaulted her young daughters. In response, Boudica rose, her eyes blazing, her fury unrelenting, and gathered an army. She led one of the most devastating uprisings Rome would ever face. Cities were burned, Roman outposts fell, tribes once divided were united under her banner, vengeance and justice guiding her every move. Boudica's story is not one of quiet grief. It's of wrath unleashed. She is war paint and battle cries. She is mother turned general. She is the fury of the oppressed, embodied in steel. Éowyn, too, burns with that same storm. After losing her cousin Theodred, watching her uncle wither under Grima's control, and witnessing the fall of her people's dignity, Éowyn dons her armor and rides into war. Not with permission, with purpose. Her courage mirrors Boudica's. A refusal to be sidelined, silenced, or left behind while men fight in the light. She rides not because she's allowed to, but because she must. Boudica's rebellion ends in defeat. Her forces crushed, her fate uncertain. Some say Boudica took poison to avoid being paraded through Rome in chains. Others claim she died of illness soon after her final battle. Her daughters disappeared from record. Éowyn's battlefield is just as brutal. She faces the Witch King of Angmar, a foe no man can kill, but she is no man. She doesn't just defy prophecy, she fulfills it. Joan of Arc. Now we ride into the heart of 15th century France to a girl who heard voices, carried banners, and changed the course of history. She was just a teenager when she claimed divine visions told her to lift the siege of Orleans and crown a king. She had no training, no armor at first, no allies in court. What she had was unwavering faith and terrifying clarity. Joan stepped onto the battlefield, not as a symbol, but as a commander. She rallied soldiers, inspired the desperate, and struck fear into hardened men twice her age. They mocked her for wearing armor. They doubted her visions. They feared her influence. Still, she stood tall, hair cut short, sword in hand, banner in the wind. Éowyn shares the same defiance. She too wears armor no one offered her. She too disguises herself to stand shoulder to shoulder with men. She too fights not for fame, but because something sacred is burning in her. Love, loyalty, the unbearable ache of watching everything she treasures fall to ruin. But where Joan of Arc was captured, condemned for heresy, and burned by the very people she helped, Éowyn lives. She is wounded in battle, yes, but she is not broken. Could the Witch King be more than just a Nazgul? Could he be the embodiment of death itself, soulless, undead, faceless? In that moment on the battlefield, Éowyn doesn't just slay a wraith, she slays the shadow that has followed her for so long, her own death wish, her own sorrow. She desired to fall in battle and leave the pain behind. By defeating the Witch King, she also defeats the part of herself that wanted oblivion. She turns toward life. To be honest, I really struggled writing this episode. Éowyn is a character very dear to my heart. I wanted to do her justice, and I got hung up, especially on her ending. I felt like I had to decode it. Was her role as wife and healer a sign of growth? Or was it a return to the same cage? only gilded this time with peace and love. If it wasn't a return to the cage, why not? Is this Tolkien's version of the heroine's journey? Is Éowyn a feminist character? Should we be satisfied with her arc? I have a lot to say on that topic, and I realize it deserves its own deep dive. If that's something you'd like to hear, let me know. I'd love to explore it in a future episode. But for now, let's set aside the why of Tolkien's choice or the meaning we might assign to it. Let's stick to what actually happened. Éowyn doesn't die in battle. She doesn't fall into myth. She survives and begins again. Tolkien breaks with the tradition of tragedy. He gives Éowyn more than glory. He gives her peace. Like the Shieldmaidens of old, Éowyn claims her place in history. But unlike them, she is allowed to grow beyond it. Where Boudica's war ends in ashes, Éowyn's ends in light. She steps off the battlefield, and she lays down her sword, and she finds another path, one that Boudica, Brynhildr, and Joan were never allowed to walk. Tolkien doesn't just borrow from their courage. He rewrites their endings. In Éowyn, we see what happens when the woman with the sword gets to walk away from the flames. And when she sets her blade aside, it's not because she was wrong to fight. It's because she chooses a different kind of strength. She chooses healing. She chooses life. That's not weakness, it's growth. And it's defiance in another form. In that way, her arc quietly mirrors the women of post-World War I, those who had taken on new roles during the war and were left to redefine themselves after it. Now let's talk about the modern heroine. Like the women who may have inspired her, I believe Éowyn left her own legacy. Her survival opened a door in fiction that had rarely existed before. She gave us permission to imagine new endings, one that weren't just about glory or sacrifice, but about healing. Since Lord of the Rings, we've seen heroines step into that space. Katniss Everdeen, a reluctant hero who endures loss, trauma, and PTSD, and never returns to innocence. Brienne of Tarth, strong, honorable, but shaped by mockery, rejection, and grief. Galadriel, in the recent Rings of Power series. She's a warrior who cannot lay down her sword, still chasing the ghosts of war. We have Mourning from Wheel of Time, Kate Austen from Lost, Arya and Sansa Stark, Feyre Archeron, Aelin Galathynius, Manon, women who fight, survive, and evolve. These characters battle enemies, yes, but also their own pain, their own past, and the journey doesn't end when the war does. Éowyn blazed that trail. She gave us a new kind of happily ever after, one where the aftermath is a battlefield of its own, where healing takes courage, where choosing peace isn't surrender, it's strength. How many women in myth and history were denied that kind of ending? How many women weren't allowed to heal? Éowyn becomes a voice for those women too. In a genre so often defined by heroic death, Éowyn asks us to consider something else. What is the cost of survival? And what kind of power lies in choosing to live? She doesn't just honor the women who came before her, she transcends them. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Meet the Muse for more history, more myth, and more of the women who shape our stories. Until then, may you find the courage not just to fight, but to heal.